Our next guest, that is the Sunday Papers, and while Stephen Conroy joins us here in the studio, let's hear from his shadow, Malcolm Turnbull, who is the guest this morning on Meet the Press.
To give you a comparison, the United States government is spending $7 billion of taxpayers' money to support broadband rollout. We are spending, on a per capita basis, 100 times more of taxpayers' money. What we are doing in Australia is absolutely unique in the world. There is nowhere else in the world that a national government is spending this sort of money to build one national government-owned network, which, I must remind you, is going to result in higher and higher prices for broadband access.
But if the Productivity Commission came up with a cost-benefit analysis that was positive, would you support it?
Well, look, I would not, as a matter of principle, give a blank cheque to anyone, even the Productivity Commission. But if the Productivity Commission were to report on the NBN, as they should, and if they were to give it a big tick from a cost-benefit point of view, it would be incredibly persuasive.
Senator Stephen Conroy, good morning.
Good to be with a fellow Collingwood supporter, Barry.
Thank you. Now, there's a challenge. If the Productivity Commission ran a cost-benefit analysis and gave the rollout a big tick, the Coalition almost certainly would embrace it.
Well, Tony Abbott set Malcolm Turnbull one task when he gave him this portfolio: to demolish the national broadband network. They've been seeking to delay the rollout for months and months and months. They've refused to allow debate in the Senate. They said we had to release the ACCC report, we had to release the McKinsey's report, we had to provide them all this information. We've done all of that. And now what do they want? Another report. All around the world, cost-benefit analysis has been done into the productivity boost of a broadband network, and it's all been positive, overwhelmingly positive.
But here's a way through, here's a way towards consensus, that if it gave it a tick, it would be incredibly persuasive.
Well, Tony Abbott's saying something a little bit different, and he's the leader of the Liberal Party. He's saying Malcolm Turnbull's job is to demolish it. So Malcolm still didn't, even though he sort of leaned that way that he might be prepared to accept it, Tony Abbott has made it very clear they're not going to change their broadband policy, and they're going to demolish the national broadband network. So Malcolm Turnbull's got lots of fine words, but he's still not prepared to say, if this was positive, we would support it.
But all you have in this case is an NBN internal business case, a sort of a self-serving examination, so you're really relying on studies done elsewhere.
No, that's not right at all. Firstly, we've got a $25 million McKinsey's report, which shows that the financial case is viable and gets a return for taxpayers, as well as affordable prices for Australians. Then if you look just last year, Access Economics and IBM commissioned a report into the productivity case for a fibre to the node, not even the super fast network we're going to build. And it found that the case was overwhelmingly positive. My own department has released a couple of sectoral analyses in the last few months, which again show that there's a positive benefit in teleworking, in e-health. So this is just another time-wasting proposal by the opposition that are desperate to stop the rollout of the national broadband
But is that
network.
essentially why you're opposed to a cost-benefit analysis? Because it would waste time?
Well, it wastes money. All around the world, the OECD are about to complete a major study into broadband productivity, a major study, cost-benefit analysis drawn from all across the world. And so what we have now is demands for more studies and more time wasting.
In the US, at the other point that Malcolm Turnbull made, the US is spending $7 billion on a broadband rollout. Australia, on a per capita basis, 100 times that.
Thank God. I mean, in the US, and I've been in the US a number of times recently, their broadband network is just falling behind the rest of the world. I mean, I've seen these recent comparisons. Oh, look what the UK are doing, look what the US are doing. Well, let's look what Korea is doing. Let's look what Singapore is doing. Let's look what Japan is doing. Let's look what Hong Kong is doing. The rest of the world is going fibre to the home, and Australia continues to slip further and further down the tables because we've refused to make the necessary investments to upgrade our copper network, our ageing copper network. This is about the era of fibre.
So as we do, does that lead to higher and higher prices?
Well, look, not at all. And I think when the business case, or the majority of the information around the business case, which we'll now be receiving, I understand the NBN board considered it on Friday, and they'll be now putting it to the government. Obviously, we'll consider it over the next week or two, but I would expect some fairly major information to be available about the cost, the pricing, the rates of return, all of that sort of information. I believe will be very public very shortly.
You'll make that public after you've seen it?
Absolutely.
Do you think it'll clear up this question about what it actually costs to wire up a home? There's been suggestions of $3,000, $6,000. What is the actual figure?
Well, this is one of those great furphies, Barry, an attempt to denigrate the NBN in the eyes of the ordinary Australian public. It costs nothing. We will provide a connection into people's home, and then you can plug into that connection and away you go, using an existing Wi-Fi network, using the sorts of technology in people's homes today. Those sorts of figures imply you're fibring your toilet up. I mean, this isn't Brisbane, but that's what these sort of figures imply, $3,000. Even the Australian were walking away from that figure during the week.
What if you want the faster speed, the maximum capability? Does it then cost you more money?
You can get the maximum capability for the connection in the room and within the house. If you want to watch IPTV on 4 different screens in 4 different rooms, you might need to do some cabling. But that's no different to Foxtel, for instance, where they'll give you one connection for their price. If you want Foxtel in a second room, you pay $15 a month or so for an extra screen in an extra room. There's no difference here between this concept that's been created by some newspapers, that to get the complete excitement of the National Broadband Network, you need to fibre up every room, wire up every room. It's just a nonsense.
One of those newspapers, The Australian, says that just 1 in 10 are taking up the service in the first 3 towns in Tasmania. Is that the figure, 1 in 10?
That's after 3 months. The network got turned on live just 3 months ago. What McKinsey said was the financial case is built on, in their view, a take-up in 12 months of 6 to 12%. We're actually ahead of schedule. But all of the arguments around take-up are irrelevant once we reach the agreement with Telstra. We are closing down the copper network. We are actually transferring every customer who wants a fixed line onto the national broadband network. So trying to suggest that 1 in 10 is somehow a fail mark when it's actually ahead of schedule and irrelevant ultimately, because every fixed line customer transfers onto the national broadband network that wants to.
OK, so 1 in 10 is OK. 2 out of 3 of those 1 in 10, 2 out of 3 taking it up are choosing the cheaper service. Does that threaten the viability of the project?
Look, not at all. I think there's this great furphy that everyone should be taking 100 meg. That's not what we're proposing at all. People will get a suite of products to choose from, and they will be able to make the choice that they want. If you just want a simple telephone to make calls on, you'll be able to get that. If you just want lower than 100 megs, and there'll be a raft of choices for consumers depending on what the retail service providers want to offer. But the sort of wholesale products which we'll be offering, that suite of wholesale products, will be part of that information we'll be releasing very shortly.
OK, and you've got decisions to take on anti-siphoning. Now, of course, the aims of those laws are to put aside a list of top sporting events for free-to-air TV so that people don't have to subscribe to pay TV to get it. When will he have decisions on that?
Well, look, very shortly. We need to introduce legislation. We need to put a regulation in place. So the Parliament will be seeing all of those in the next few weeks. This package will be looked at by the Cabinet over the next few weeks, and then we have to table some legislation. So it will all be on the table before the end of the parliamentary sessions in November.
And the laws haven't changed since 1992. Now, a lot have happened since then, an explosion of channels, and in particular the free-to-air digital channels. Now, is that's going to be a major consideration?
Well, as I said, at the moment there's a piece of legislation that bans TV stations from showing sport on the anti-siphoning list on those multi-channels. So if part of the package, and I've been fairly open about this over many years now, I support that general idea that some of the sport on the anti-siphoning should be able to be shown on the multi-channels. If that's the case, then we do need to introduce legislation to change the law.
And about, 70% of people now have access to these multi-channels, and very shortly it'll be almost 100%.
Well, that's right. We're seeing an extraordinary take-up. I mean, what drives take-up is content. And you're seeing that as 9, 7 and 10 have rolled out these new channels, there's been a surge in the figures again. We're well on target. We had a very successful shutdown of the analogue signal in Mildura. We're up to 10,000 in-home, going into pensioners' homes, putting the set-top box in for them, doing any wiring, fixing up any antenna issues. Over 10,000 in South Australia and Broken Hill now, in regional South Australia and Broken Hill. The program is going very, very well.
So if you were to do that then, what can you do for pay TV? Could you then reduce the list of protected sporting events?
Well, there's a range of options. What I anticipate is there'll be some sports that aren't currently on will move on, and there'll be some sports potentially on that may come off. So it's about reaching that balance to ensure that it's still, given the change in circumstances, given all the new choice that people have, it's about reaching a fair balance between wanting to make sure that Australians can still see those iconic sports. I mean, one of the issues that many of you, your listeners would know, your viewers would know, I'm a mad soccer fan, and I've said we had a policy going into 2007, it's still our policy and will be part of the package, that Socceroos World Cup qualifiers will go back onto free-to-air television.
And as you go through all of this process, you have to keep in mind the interests of the media companies, the sporting codes and the viewers. Can you really take care of all of them?
Look, it is always a challenge to balance. I've always said one of the more complex parts about this debate is it's not just between two parties. It's actually between a whole range of different organisations and parties. So finding that balance is challenging, and I think where we're heading, we'll find that balance which will ensure that Australians still get to see those key iconic sporting events.
And you say
but I am prepared to guarantee you that, you know, in one set of circumstances, Barry, Collingwood will be live, free, on Friday nights every week.
Well, when you put it that way, I mean, you are a keen consumer of sport. Can you be dispassionate about this? If you're sitting in Brisbane and you're waiting for Collingwood to come on and it's on 3-hour delay and you think, I'm the minister, I can do something about this.
Well, that happened during the recent final series. The Geelong-Collingwood match in Canberra, for instance, was on quite a number of hours after it actually started. And I got many phone calls, but that's the sort of thing that we're able to see if we've got the multi-channelling able to show the anti-siphon list of sport. You'd be able to see it as it was played. So that's the sort of positive change, I think, to get that right balance between ensuring that sports fans still get a chance to see the key games that they want to see, but also providing an opportunity for the pay TV market to also be competitive in this area as well.
OK, you've spoken with James Packer a couple of times since he made his move on 10. I think you met him last night at a function.
So we're at the Foxtel 15-year anniversary dinner. A fascinating night, some fabulous new technology on the way.
And have you got any idea, or any better informed of what he's up to, what his motivation is?
Well, I think he's decided that he wants to get back into free-to-air television. I think he's got a foot in all the camps, and he likes to have all the bases covered. There are some issues around competition and concentration that I think Graham Samuel is looking at, so we wouldn't want to preempt the outcome of those. But I think James is a very, very savvy businessman, and this is a very clever move.
And how do you regard the 20% stake, or less than 20%? Is that a minority interest, or because it's enough to pull together various alliances, then, as Graham Samuel, I think, would see it, that it's effectively a controlling interest?
Well, I think I shouldn't preempt Graham's view, but it's clear that I think James has got more support than just his own holding from all indications. So I think Graham's got a real challenge there to make those decisions. But if in an open share registry, if one person has 19%, then there is a real situation where they could exercise a dominant control. So I don't think that's the case. I think there's more people behind James's bid than that. But that's the sort of judgment that Graham Samuel is rightfully independent and should be making.
And just finally, Chris Mitchell, the editor-in-chief of The Australian, accused you of a hissy fit and says that good public policy is foreign to you.
Look, unlike The Australian, I'm not going to engage in an ongoing war. I'm just going to keep to making the arguments about the facts around the National Broadband Network. And to give you another example, a story was written on Saturday, I think, yesterday, which suggested that we were going to be not having battery backup. The journalist was told the government has instructed the National Broadband Network that battery backup will be mandatory, yet the story still appeared without any reference to that.
Well, you said you're not going to go on with it. Winston Churchill once said that a politician complaining about the media is like a mariner complaining about the sea. I guess what they're saying is you rely on it, you just have to learn to live in it.
That's right. It's a robust game, politics, but what we've got to make sure is the facts are accurately reported. And that's what I'm particularly going to continue to do. I'm going to ensure that the facts about the National Broadband Network are not lost in a tidal wave of attempting to misrepresent what is actually happening.
Thanks for your time this morning.
Good to be with you, Barry.